We look forward to hearing what you've got to say about Australia's looming energy crisis.
Yes.
I think those views are shared by more than a few here this evening.
Yes.
Okay, anyhow, so thank you for all of that. I penned this book a couple of months ago, and in fact it took me 8 months of very hard work to put together, and I'll tell you how that all happened shortly. About me, I did chemistry, industrial chemistry and metallurgy at university. After a couple of years working and also studying at the local technical college, and went on to upgrade those qualifications. And what actually happened, I made a submission to the Senate inquiry that finished in August last year, and found in the negative on the basis that the Labor had the majority as far as lifting the ban on nuclear. But I gave that 11-page, 12-page document to a friend of mine who's one of the top mining analysts in Australia, who read it, and he said, well, you know, I thought you were pretty faced, but you seem to have got a bit of grey matter there. And he said, why don't you write a book on it? And that was the 23rd of February last year. And I finished writing this thing on the 23rd of October. And that's 495 pages, so quite a lot of effort went into it, and 14 hours a day, every day, except my 2 golfing days. So that's how the thing came to be. There's no other book that I've seen that covers the market and covers the topic as such. I have researched a number of books, Saul Griffith's book, and the guy that was the Ross Garno has written a number of books, Super Highway and similar. So the book is also very comprehensive. In fact, the way of the design layout, it sort of follows Ian Plimer's book, Heaven and Earth, which many of you would have read. And I think I've read it, and I've read all his other books. So it is very comprehensive and very detailed. But the mantra of the book is, can we keep the lights on? And that's the subheading of the book. I examined all aspects of the energy crisis. I looked at all the energy sources, and you can see them there. And also long-term energy storage. I also talk quite a lot about critical minerals, and I've got quite a lot of expertise in that area as a sort of semi-failed investor in the mining industry. I've made 2 fortunes, I mean serious money, but sadly I've lost 2.5 fortunes, so I'm still behind the 8 ball. But it's given me the chance to go to many of the major mining centres and mines around Australia. Like for instance, just recently, in the last week or two, the Honeymoon ISL uranium mine has gone into production, and I had spent a day at the Beverley mine, which is 80-90 kilometres away, which uses the same technology, but obviously quite a lot older. So I also discuss EVs and the batteries, and also the magic word hydrogen, which got a lot of money in the budget.
So the mic near to your mouth.
Okay, sorry, beg your pardon. I see there's huge economic opportunities for us within this whole thing. I mean, number one, there's a huge amount of government money sloshing around, whether it's state or federal. So if you want, you can get your hands on them and do some good with it. That's got some potential benefit. But I'm not sure how much good they actually really are doing with it. So I eventually look in the second last or third last chapter of the book. I talk about, can we keep the lights on, and look state by state about what the probability of the lights staying on. And in fact, I was quite generous when I did that, and subsequently there's been 3 states that have had power outages of some significance, and the biggest one being Victoria, where they had the problem in the Loy Yang Valley, and half of Melbourne didn't have power for 4 days or thereabouts. So and then I come up with rather cheekily, a 12-point action plan to try and fix the problem. But you can see, just as a quick look at that there, without me harping on it, I've got 6 chapters on nuclear and uranium and all aspects of that. I cover it very thoroughly. I talk a lot about the battery technologies and the chemistries of the batteries of the future, which are coming, which are going to make some impact on what's happening with this energy thing, particularly from transportation, but then also, of course, storage. And the storage is the issue where you capture the utility scale sunlight and all the rest of it, and then it might be available for 6 or 8 hour duration thereafter. So I talk about all that. So, but I want to have a bit of interaction with you gentlemen and ladies here. There's a couple of ladies. a topical thing is how you talk about battery fires and lithium and all the rest of it. And the first question is, how many million kilometers are cumulatively traveled by Teslas before they break into fire? And this excludes collisions, by the way, because it's not fair. If a car has a collision, it can burst into fire straight away, but that can happen any time, anywhere. So that's the question. And anybody got any answers or thoughts? Is it going to be 30 million, 75 million, or 175 million?
175.
Top of the class. And then we move on. Well, before we do move on, what about an ICE vehicle? That's internal combustion engine vehicle. How far do they go between fires?
30.
Sorry?
30.
30.5 is the actual answer. Gee, we've got a clever man at the back there. Give him a... Yeah, whatever. Anyhow, the government, obviously, we all know this, but the greenhouse gas emissions by 43% by 2020, you know all about that, 82% by 2030, you hear Mr. Bowen talking about it all the time, ad infinitum, but which is also legislated in law, and this requires 22,000 solar panels to be installed every single day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And it also requires a very large wind turbine to be installed every 18 hours. Now, I don't think they're doing 7 megawatt turbines on land yet, but they might be getting close to, because they're huge. But those, the big ones are normally offshore, because they can get the blades to the site, where they can't get the blades to the site when it's inland somewhere. Okay, our EMO suggests 16 terawatt hours of solar and wind to be installed up to the 23rd of up to the middle of last year, and a noted academic at the University of New South Wales is well credentialed suggests that it's 55% of that. So big shortage. And then if you look at the forward developments as far as capital infrastructure spend is concerned, it isn't coming up to the mark. So that situation will be repeated again, no doubt, in 2024. So, but the point is, when I got into this thing as a conservative person for a long, long time, I found it much more well integrated, their plan, than I had imagined. I thought it was just bits and pieces bolted together, but there is sense in their plan. And I cannot say it's far better than what we had before, in the 9 years before, which was an absolute mishmash, and you had people running that energy portfolio, which might be substantially better than today as individuals. The fact is, they still didn't get to grasp with what had to be done. The bad things are, the time frame is impossible. It cannot be done in the time frame, and it's highly inflationary. All this money sloshing into the economy, it's just stimulating the inflation. And so it's very hard to tame inflation when government's spending left, right, and centre. Too many government subsidies, and some of them we won't ever see a return. Trying to build solar panels in the Hunter Valley at the cost of $1 billion, we will never get $1 single back in the bank from that, in my view. The other thing is energy-hungry industries like Tomago and Alcoa and the like, and I've been to all these places in my working life. They won't exist in times to come because the cost of power is just too expensive. And when you think about Tomago smelter, that's actually molten electricity, and they go where electricity price is lowest. So they'll be off before too long, I might suggest. And by the way, Tomago takes 12% of all electricity generated in New South Wales. So the first call from our EMO, when there's a hot day and air conditioners are humming and all the rest of it, the first call is to Tomago: turn down your pots to reduce your power usage. That's what helps keeps the lights on for the rest of us. The other one is, of course, this going back to the Senate inquiry. There's we're now really getting into nuclear age 2.0. Some people argue we're in the artificial intelligence age just started, which has got its own challenges, I might suggest, as we're already seeing, particularly in the educational sector. I could have had 7 professorships by the age of 25 at AI. But we're the only G20 country without nuclear power. Anyhow, solar. One of our, obviously the rising stars of Australian renewable energy scene is the rooftop solar. And Australia have done a hell of a good job there. And some people are getting benefit, but this morning's announcement, which you might have seen, was a bit negative. And by the way, this morning I have supposed to have been on 2GB at 7:15 with Ben Fordham. I recorded an interview with him earlier in the week. And he was supposed to run this morning, but I got bumped off the air until probably tomorrow because of that announcement that came out about the lack of payment to people who've got rooftop solar. That was a bigger news story than my ramble about my new book, so I got bumped off, which is what you expect. I've actually also had the privilege to go out to Wellington to look at the solar farm there that's being built. It's just it's staggering to see in context. And a kilometre or two over the hill is a huge battery of 20. I counted 20. These the biggest wind turbines I've seen on land in Australia and the like. However, this solar program requires 600 million panels to be installed in Australia to meet that 22,000 a day target. Of 350 million are new, and there's 250 to be replaced because it's only going to last up to 20 years maximum. So it just can't be done. It's just not physically possible to do what they want to do. And of course there's a huge recycling opportunity because 47% of a scrap solar panel value is in silver. So you get into a silver refining business for solar panels, you make a lot of money. And by the way, I saw this morning that 23% of all silver worldwide now is going into solar panel manufacture. And there's a massive deficit developing, and that deficit's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And a company came to the ASX yesterday or the day before, 20 cents, it's 54 cents today. It has a mine developing in Nevada. Okay, concentrated solar has got quite a lot of thing where you actually all concentrate all the heat energy from the parabolic mirrors on a central point which melts molten salts. And the heat is therefore held within the molten salts, and you can use that heat source to provide steam energy, where you create steam to run turbines. So that's becoming quite popular. China will have 30 of them running by this year. We've got a demonstration plant up at Newcastle, and there's one actually else being built commercially in Australia this time. But you know, it's like everything else. It's $203 million, but $65 million is coming out of our pockets. So none of these things seem to stand on their feet by themselves. They seem to all need government subsidy, which is worrisome. On the onshore and offshore, onshore of course got the big problem of visibility. And also we now know that they are actually changing the climate, and then the thing that's supposed to be there to try and solve, they're actually creating, because you're getting microclimates in the vicinity of wind farms. And the evidence now is irrefutable. Of course, it's happening more, it depends on geologic, it happens on the geographic and other circumstances, so it's not everyone's the same. But there's evidence that certainly the climate has been impacted locally by these particular farms as they're defeating their purpose. And of course, I don't know if you remember, about 6 or 8 months ago, one of the guys from CIS, Centre for International Studies, found in Queensland, far north Queensland, in the forest, he found 12 or 15 solar blades, which he found those lying there. And they haven't really got to the grips with how they're going to recycle these huge blades down the track yet. And but offshore is a better situation. And Ben Fordham, when I had that interview yesterday, or the day before yesterday, he said, "What do you think about offshore?" I said, "I'm quite a proponent of offshore. They can be put out of sight, out of mind politically, perhaps over the horizon. And a lot of them, those bigger ones, will be actually floating, so they'll just be anchored to the sea floor, but they'll be floating platforms, and therefore don't do quite as much damage as, for instance, if you're putting oil wells down at sea, perhaps. And what they do is they generate a lot of power because they're very, very large, up to 250 meter blade diameter. And then you can bring the power under the water to Sydney, for instance, give you examples, Sydney or to Newcastle from offshore up, north of Newcastle. So that happens, and therefore you avoid the poles and the wires thing to a large degree. Okay, and it said the World Wind Energy Council suggests that this is just not happening internationally anywhere near fast enough to meet overall global energy transition goals. As I said, we had to do that every 18 hours, which I said earlier. I talked about the climate issue there. So the wind farm thing is communities against offshore wind, and you've seen a fair bit of that developing, but there have been a few compromises there. But you've also seen two government departments start to go at each other in the last 2 or 3 weeks. The Department of Environment and the Energy Department had a go at itself. And I don't know if any of you caught up with the court case this morning. There was a very significant win for anti-renewables this morning in the court. It's quite significant. I can't just get my mind around the whole thing, but I did read an article about it late this afternoon. Okay, but the question is this: without many offshore wind farms, Lawrence targets dead in the water. It's an absolute critical component for making the targets that we saw earlier be achieved. I'm quite keen on some pumped hydro. Obviously, we all know that Snowy 1 has been a tremendous success for a very, very long time. Snowy 2.0 was ill-conceived by a said gentleman. We will never deliver a commercial. It will never deliver a commercial turn. And I said to Ben Fordham in my interview with him, he said, "What do you think its long-term future is?" And I said, "It has no future." I said, "I don't think it'll ever deliver a megawatt of power to the grid." And he dropped his coffee cup at that stage of the proceeding. So it was quite interesting. So I don't think it'll ever be completed. It's done 800 meters. That machine's got to go 16 kilometers. They are speaking to a geologist who knows that area well at this conference was at last week. He said the rocks they still have to go through are the hardest rocks in this continent. So he said, I ain't going to make much progress with that hard rock. So watch this space. The other thing, of course, is some of you might remember that when Basslink went out some years ago, I think it's 2016, somebody damaged the cable and they had nothing going there, and they bought 100 or 200 generators, diesel generators, to get themselves going and so forth. Now they were going to put a double new cable in the Morans link to pump hydropower from Tasmania to Victoria to compensate for lack of gas in Victoria. They were going to do a double, but they've now decided because of cost overruns, it's only going to be a single cable. So who knows how vulnerable Tasmania and Victoria might be relative to that. But pumped hydro, back to that, the Kidston Energy Project, which is the Mount Kidston gold mine, two reservoirs, one high, one low. Quite a good project with a lot of solar supporting it. It's so good that this has been sold to Hong Kong interests. And in fact, the bid is still open, and most of the people are accepting the bid. So that company will be delisted. Genexen will be owned by the Chinese or Hong Kong interests. And Evolution Mining at Mount Rawdon, which is a similar project. I heard Jake Klein when I launched my book at the Sydney Mining Club. He was a speaker after me, and he said they're going to build a similar project at Mount Rawdon. But the shareholders in the audience were quite vocal against, quite surprised. There was 180 people there, and 4 or 5 people which were shareholders were showing their concern about it. And then they've got this huge Barumba Dam in Queensland, but Queensland has got a lot of debt actually, and I wonder where they're going to get an X6 built from, probably from the feds. Sorry, what's happened? Okay, hydrogen biomass. Green, we talk about different colours of hydrogen, but green hydrogen is Twiggy's main main interests, and obviously built this big, Fortescue built this big energy process system in Gladstone where they're producing these electrolyzers and so forth. But hydrogen absorbs 2.5% of the world's energy consumption comes out of hydrogen. People don't realize, I think it's 92 million tons of hydrogen are produced per year. So it's already happening to a degree, but not essentially by hydrolysis. This is the Paris Accords, the COP meeting, are targeting 34 million tons by 2030. But there's nobody making financial investment decisions to put the capital on the table to make it all happen to the extent that it's necessary or needed. And by the way, it's just interesting to note that a couple of years ago, a special craft was in fact converted by the Japanese to take a cargo from Australia. It was the first cargo that's been shipped, and it's at almost absolute zero. They had to super cool the stuff down to get it, but it worked. Except that it cost many tens of millions to modify the vessel, and there's been no follow-up cargo as far as that's concerned. Okay, as I said, the budget 2 nights ago, they got a large, big handout. I think hydrogen got $6 billion extra bucks to go to with what they already got floating around. But the fact is they've got to get this from $6 per kilogram to $1.50. Biden in America with his IRA they're giving a $3.50 subsidy, and it's still not happening in the US with the $3.50 subsidy. So whether they get there, it's still under dispute. Smarter people than me would know what's happening here. Don't quite know why I've frozen it. Sorry, that thing's just stopped working. Maybe, okay, I know what's happened. I've just flicked the off I've just touched the offside off switch. Okay, now this is another little snippet to make sure you're all still awake. This is the Drax power station is about the biggest coal-fired power station as it was in the UK. It's up in Yorkshire, not far from where I was born. I left there when I was 2.5 years of age. And there's also a nuclear power station right next to it as well. But they don't use coal. It's built on it has the cleanest coal in the UK underneath it or around it. And they've been feeding it for many years. But those that say we should not, thou shalt not anymore, and that stopped. And now they're getting fuel from somewhere else. What type of fuel? And where's it coming from?
Wood pellets from the
Wood.
US.
Oh, you guys are too smart. You're too smart. Okay, 70,000 tonners are coming across the ocean, burning diesel as they chug along across the Atlantic. They load them onto trucks which are diesel powered, and they chug them to the bloody thing. And you know what? They do it, and the wood coming up those chimneys, the CO2 is higher than the coal that was 100, 200 meters away. So, but it's renewable, and it doesn't count because it's important.
The other word for unreliable.
That's right. So, anyhow, go on to catch you guys. I'll catch you guys before I'm finished with one of these questions. Okay. Gas power peaking is absolutely critical. To cope with the aged coal plants and so forth and the like. And obviously we've got quite a few of those happening. Ben Fordham asked me yesterday, what about Auroring? What are my views on Auroring? I said, if that closes down as planned next year, we're up the creek without a paddle. Simple as that. And technically that plant is able to work at least until the end of this decade. It's technically competent to do that. Now, sure, it's going to cost more each year to keep it going, and there's people in the room I know have got more expertise in that area than I, but he was asking me, and I said, well, if it goes off, we've got a serious problem. Gas peaking, we won't have enough to cover the gap. So there we are, not enough gas power capability nationally. And then the other thing is this Narrabri coal seam, and this case today has got definite relevance to getting Narrabri coal seam gas up and running. It's going to be one of the beneficiaries. But here we are, we've got the government, one department fighting against the other. And this National Defenders or Environmental National Defenders Office, he got $70 million last year in the budget to fight the other government departments. So, and of course, they're also involved on the warpath, these activists against Scarborough and, of course, the Barossa, which is one in Tiwi Island, north of the Tiwi Islands up north. And of course, no gas reserves in Victoria. We haven't been exploring for a long time. A geologist who's worked extensively on Bass Strait told me, he told me last week at this conference, he says there's plenty of gas still left in Bass Strait. You just have to spend the money and the time to get it out of the ground. It's still there, and it's still economically. So he knows better than I don't. But our salvation will be the Beetaloo Basin in the Northern Territories. That has got enough gas. The actual Valkyrie beach layer in the Beetaloo Basin has got enough gas in. That layer alone has got enough gas in it to keep Australia fully supplied for 25 years. And the additional layers that still haven't been fully exploited or are still developing it. But at least it's getting good support from the Northern Territory government. Okay, by the way, I just put there, I went over it, but I had a boat at one stage in the times of mining investment success. And I used to go offshore, and on a quiet day, a flat day, you can see bubbles coming out of the ocean. And those bubbles are gas coming out of the gas field that I think goes all the way from Port Stephens to Wollongong. But it's banned. It's banned from further. There's been 2 hulls put in it. One was promising, one was dud. But it's been banned. So it's madness. We've got within 25 k's of here, almost unlimited gas available. Anyhow, renewable energy zones, and I said I went up to Wellington and I saw this beautiful first element of a new renewable energy zone. Unbelievable. And yes, also last week at this conference, I met a geologist, a CEO of a company, and he owns the exploration rights underneath it. And he said, we've got a real promising project right underneath it and next to it. And he says, we up the creek. Can't do anything to exploit it. So,
why not?
Well, the point is, I didn't go into great detail with him about it, but he says he just can't. With the way the lie of the land is right now, he can't spend any money there with any confidence to get a return, assuming that they find a commercial minerals. But it's out of sight, out of mind out there, and so forth. But the 13 of those around the country, there will be more down the track. And of course, the rewiring the nation. Gee, that's where we can get where we can get all this stuff. By the way, you probably heard the Sun Cable project, which was Mr. AGL. They were going to send this thing from the Northern Territories through to Singapore. And I'm sure there's experts in this room knows more about it than me. But when you send that power down a cable, the power output degrades as you go down the line. And it's 3,800 kilometres, and nobody did a calculation to see how much copper particularly was going to be required to go into that. And it's a year's worth of the world's copper supply to hold that cable. But nobody worried to think about that. Anyhow, so that's where that is. So, and as I said, I think the farmers yet are still to be much more vocal than they have been up to now, as far as power lines over and Ben Fordman says, why don't they, what's my thoughts, should they not go underground? I said, it's impossible, technically and financially, to put the cables underground. It's impossible to do economically over large distances. It's fine for a kilometre or two, maybe, but not over those type of distances. Of course, the other thing that we are going to get a bit of a benefit from, when you've got all this renewable, and this, as again, people know more about it than I, but the question of trying to keep the phases sorted out with renewables. You know, we run at 50 hertz here to try and keep all those things in balance. And all the actual power generators, which are producing electricity up to now in these old stations, they're going to be used what they call synchronous condensers, which are going to try and help sustain the reliability of the output of the renewables. Because if you don't, and if you're very outside the limits, there's massive damage to hardware around the traps. What's happening? Sorry. Okay, well, Paul Broad, by the way, many of you know him personally and know of him. He got shafted by Bowen. He was the CEO of Snowy, running Snowy, and he had a disagreement and he had an alternative but to resign. And he says it's not just looking impossible, it is impossible, but it can't be done. We are blindly charging on simply due to political ideology. And and another one, Dan Westerman, who is the CEO of IEMO, and Australia's top energy bureaucrat, he said, well, basically, we're not getting enough capital in to build the things we need to build to meet the targets. And that was a comment a year ago. So the good and the bad, obviously we've got the good as far as rooftop solar. It's generating quite well. This morning's announcement, or yesterday's thing about this, about the revenue that rooftop people were going to get or not going to get anymore, is a significant development. But I think multi-story solar is going to be huge. I live at Briscoe's Point. We applied for $80,000 grant, which we think we might get, and that will pay for $85,000 or $90,000 with. Sorry. I withdraw that. We've got an EV system, $85,000. We're going to get that paid for mainly by the government, surprisingly. But we're also about to put solar on the rooftops if we get through all the regulatory process within our own community, because there's a lot of empty rooftops could benefit from solar. We talked about all the other things. And by the way, what's going to happen with EV batteries? What's likely to happen is the government will legislate down the track when there's enough EV batteries failing, in other words, they've done their natural life. They're going to be taken back and they're going to be repackaged into household battery storage, therefore allowing the vehicle to grid and also the house to grid to keep the virtual power plants running. Okay, we don't have to build these power to generating devices anymore. Take it from these things and store them. So that's going to be another interesting new business opportunity. And I've talked about all those ones there, and of course almost all these things come from China. Just quickly on, I don't know how I'm going time-wise. Is that right? Yeah,
we're traveling pretty well.
Okay. Critical minerals, talking about a little bit about nuclear, and this is a virtual power point. Sorry, what's going on? Okay, I was trying to point at that, but my pointer doesn't work too well. So there's a little dog in a house with solar on the roof. I've never seen anything quite like that. It tickled my fancy, so I chucked that in just for good measure. Okay, but world market, Australia are in a very strong position. You can see across the top line here, and this is the 6 really important critical minerals, and we're in a very strong position as far as our production and our reserves, as far as that's concerned. So we're in a pretty good way. And at the bottom, if you look at some of the cumulative demand through to 2050, there's massive demand, and we're in a good position to service a lot of that demand by supplying quality, good, low-cost material. I still don't understand what's going on here. But anyhow, the criticality analysis in the book, I've got a table that talks about the various elements, what mining criticality is and what our shortfall might likely to be to help meet the targets that are needed internationally. The processing criticality, where there's enough processing. The problem is China have taken most of the processing capability and they've locked it in. I mean, they've got 90% now of solar panels around the world. They were 80 odd, but now up to 90. Yeah. And therefore, they're doing that in almost all these mineral areas, to the point that the whole world can't do without them, and that's been done for strategic reasons, of course, and the like. But nickel, we were quite good, but it shows you how quick things can change. I put that slide together first for a launch of this book, which was the end of December, or just before Christmas, at the Mining Club in Sydney. And at that time, it became evident to me that Chinese have invested a massive amount of money on pig iron mines, nickel laterites in Indonesia. 65 new mines over the last few years, and they're just swamping the market with low-cost nickel. And Australia, who saw BHP, are talking about a 3.8 to a 3.4 billion to their books, to maybe to a provision on their books to cover perhaps closing down most of their infrastructure in Australia. Anyhow, you've heard of this Inflation Reduction Act, which is nothing of the sort. It's something quite different. At least the Europeans call it Materials Act, which is exactly what it is. And of course, that's to try to diminish the dependence on Chinese critical mineral processing and the like. And a lot of Australian companies, and that list has now grown a few more. Arafura have just added, they've got 533 million of guarantees from the government to build their rare earth plant up in the Northern Territories, or their mine, I should say, and the like. And now the automotive manufacturers, and you see 3 of them there, they're buying in directly into mines. They're taking out middleman processing, all the rest of it. They're taking a share themselves, because this EV thing, well, regardless of what you might have heard in recent weeks or months, it ain't gone away. It's just going to continue, and there's going to be more and more. The numbers are just astronomical. But we aren't in too bad a state here as far as processing these in West Australia. The West Australian government have done some smart things there in building at Banana a big hub to process a lot of these things. Having said that, the Alcoa refinery, aluminium refinery, has been noted to close, and I've been to that facility a number of times in my working life, and the like. And this is going to process a number of the critical minerals we saw on that list. There's quite a lot of really good activity going on in Collie. Collie in West Australia is where the power, the coal-fired power stations were. There's one, I think 1 or 2 still running. They're very small, but those are all being phased out in coming months. And they're putting in some solar. They've got a gas facility there and a few other ways to produce the power. And so forth. And Iluka, which you might know as a mineral sands company, they've got this $1.25 billion support from the government to build a very large rare earths, because in the heavy mineral sands, there is quite a significant percentage of rare earths, and they are now tapping into those. And there are a number of others doing the same type of thing over in the West. This is the one in which has just got a $533 million commitment from the government. So, okay, another little snippet here. Which nuclear power plant was finished 39 years ago and never turned on?
39 years. North Korea?
No. But when a new president came to being, the first instruction he did, but like Biden when he got into the White House and he had this whole pile of these things to sign, cancelling Mr. Trump's policies, whatever. First thing he said, get this upgraded and get it going ASAP. That's Marcos from the Philippines. It's a 540 odd megawatt plant, not big nuclear plant, but that's what he says. We've got to get this thing bloody running.
Bong.
Yeah. So that's where that is. Okay, snippet number 4. Other than Ansto Lucas Heights, Australia started building a nuclear power station in Australia. Now, I asked people, where is it? And they said Murray's Beach, and that's not the answer I'm after.
Jarvis Bay.
Jarvis Bay is where it happened. That was where it's overgrown now, but that's where they started putting the footings in for our first nuclear power station and the like. Okay, what year was that?
1970 something, I think.
1981.
81.
And why did they stop?
One person was said to 1 p.m.
Sorry?
One person was said to 1 p.m. Turn it down and we'll turn you off.
I don't think that's not the answer that I believe to be the case, but you might be right as well. But we had a change of Prime Minister.
That's right.
Billy McMahon became the Prime Minister, and even though he was a Conservative government, he was against nuclear, and he said stop it. But another factor, because he took over from John Gordon. And the other factor was they just found gas in Bass Strait. And they said, all our prisoners have come at once, we don't need nuclear. And that's why it stopped. But I didn't know until fairly recently that we actually started. I found a friend of mine who actually worked on that project for some time. Okay, I've got, as I say, very comprehensive information in my book in 6 chapters on nuclear. Safety issues particularly prevalent. Also what you should do with uranium and to discover it and process it. And also how you produce nuclear fuel. People don't realize that production of nuclear fuel is quite complex. You start with yellow cake, it goes through quite an extensive and very expensive process to get you to the point that you've got fuel rods in a nuclear reactor producing energy. So how to build a plant on time. And we've heard Mr. Bowen make many pronouncements, and he takes these circumstances overseas and he reports them correctly. But the point is, he doesn't look at the circumstances why they were and why things happened as they did. And there's very good reasons why those things happened as they did. And they're all explainable and like. And the Koreans are particularly good at producing nuclear power stations. You only commit to nth of a kind. In other words, you don't become the experimental person and build the first one of a kind. You make sure there's 10 or 12 or 15 of that model being in use somewhere else and it's been debugged. And okay, so you make sure it's much easier to do. And then you let the vendor of the reactor do his job without interfering. No changes to the proven design. All the risk issues involved. You let people get on with what they're doing, and you put in place a very strong regulatory regime to start with, so it can't be changed when you get a change of government. Every 3 or 4, 5, 5, 6 years you get a change of government, so they can't change the rules halfway through because you'll never get finished. It'll cost what's happening in England with the Hinkley Point C, which is costing 3 times what they expected to keep to produce the one there they're producing in Somerset, and it's just costing the timescale. It's double. It's 4 years late already and counting. And in America, the Vochtel ones, I talk about those. Vochtel 3 and 4. 4 came on stream last month. The first nuclear power station was built in 25 years in America, over budget. Westinghouse went bankrupt during the period of time. And Bowen says it took all this length of time to do it, but for 4 years nothing happened because Westinghouse went bust. And then Toshiba picked up the pieces. Toshiba are now trying to sell Westinghouse's interest, or their interest, whatever. But KEPCO, which is Korean, and I was fortunate enough to spend 3 months living in Korea, and I was the National Cancer Centre being treated on a machine there we still don't have to this day in Australia. It cost $250 million. And that cured, well, for those 12 years I've been in remission. And Koreans have got a can-do attitude. Unbelievable, the whole country. And these guys built the Baraka nuclear power plants, 4 of them, in the UAE, on budget and on time, using this methodology. And they did 8 more of their own in Korea, South Korea. Exactly the same situation. They can do it, and they can do it on time. So that's the answer, Mr. Bowen. And of course, you might also remember when the Vice President of Westinghouse in Sydney last November told, when Bowen said it was going to cost $386 billion to put 71 SMRs in, and she the next day said, I've only got 3 or 5 degrees, but my maths showed that we can actually build 71 SMRs in Australia, have them running by 2033, and we'll charge you $1 billion each. You hook them up to the existing infrastructure, and you solve your power problems. Okay, this is SMRs and the like, and we're talking about here up to 300 megawatts. Even though Rolls-Royce, which we're now in bed with because they're going to produce a new power source for the next generation of nuclear submarines, 8 of the 12 that we're getting, or 9, are going to be built with using this new power source with the US, Australia, and England putting money in, and Australia, or in the last month, have sent $3 or $4 or $5 billion to that project in the UK to finance the building of a new nuclear propulsion system for the new generation of submarines. And they still shy about these things. It's just incredible.
Crazy stuff.
Anyhow, so, and by the way, just as far as micro, they're up to 10 megawatts. A company called Last Energy there has now got 51 firm orders for micro reactors. They actually, some of them are a bit more than that. When I wrote the book, it says 30 or 35. They've now got 51 as of yesterday or the day before, and the like. But, so I'm waffling on a bit here. Can we keep the lights on? I said possibly not in some states. And I do a bit of analysis of that, but quite honestly, I was pretty generous. But this is interesting little things in my book I've got on the left-hand page of the end of chapters, because you always start a page in a book, in a book, you've got to write the chapter that starts on the right-hand page, and I've put tributes to famous scientists. And Jules Verne in 1746 or whatever the year was, he says one day we will get power, an unlimited amount of power out of water. And if you think about what's happening, he's pretty close to the mark hundreds of years later. And this guy, Michael Faraday, the father of electricity, regarded by some, he waffles on a bit, but he says it's not right to hold them in obstinate blindness or retain them when proved to be erroneous. And I said, does that remind you of someone? I think we all know who that does remind you of, as far as that's concerned. Okay, final thoughts. I put here, I call for a Royal Commission. Now, the governments don't call Royal Commissions unless they know what the answer is going to be. But the point is, there's so much the spirit, the happenings around this great country with what we're trying to do as far as energy, and you've got 6 states and 2 territories poking their noses in, and all the politicians that we've been graced with. The fact of the matter is, what really needs to get fully to grips with it for our long-term future is a Royal Commission to really identify the truth, because we aren't getting the truth, sadly enough, from any side of the ledger, by the way, in my view. So we've got to get rid of those nuclear bans, because we're going to need it. The poles and wires issue, I think, is really critical. The farmers are just not going to put up with it, and it's going to get more and more intense as time goes by. And I've got other, I grade them down as far as other issues in the particular book. And then this is a question that might stump the learned gentlemen and ladies in the audience. Can you tell me what the Beaufort Gyre is?
I'm guessing that it's an ocean current in the Beaufort Sea.
Okay, well, I'll give you 40 or 50 out of 100 for that answer. It's not a long way off the way. And by the way, the book there's only one paragraph in the book that's really about climate change. At the outset, I say this book is not about climate change. This book is about energy transition, different things altogether.
Yeah.
And for the case of the book, I've accepted that climate change is real and we need to do these things. I don't believe that's the case, I might add, but that's the premise of my book, to do it, because you don't want to isolate 50% of the buyers of your book by saying there's no climate change. So you've got to think commercial as far as these things are concerned. So anyhow, we've got the Beaufort Gyre. The Beaufort Gyre is a mass of water south of the Arctic. That is, it's growing all the time, and it's growing because of the supposed heat up of the planet. And it has been known in historic times to break forth into the North Sea. And that could happen at any time. And not many people are doing much physics on this. And if that happens, that massive cold water will drop the temperature of the Earth by 1.5 degrees within months.
Oh, the
And it'll be sorry?
They won't like that.
Well, I'm saying to you, that's my contribution to climate science in the book, one paragraph, and I knew I'd catch most of you. Good effort, but not sort of half right. Okay, so as far as that's concerned. So, each chapter in the book is basically almost a standalone story in itself, and it's pretty easily understood. I've now sold. I'm now going to a third print run, so I've got a lot of feedback and so forth as far as that's concerned. And I've got 3 young grandchildren, and
Me too.
Ben Fordham said to me 2 days ago, he said, "Why you write the book?" I said, when I came to Australia in the 80s, Australia was a land of milk and honey, an opportunity. It isn't that today, but to get back to there, we need low-cost energy. If we don't get low-cost energy, our future looks quite bleak. And I've got 3 lovely grandchildren. I'd like them to live in the prosperity that my wife and I enjoyed as new Australians arriving here in the 80s. He said, "Oh, good." You know, he quite liked that answer. But it's important for us all, and your group particularly, which I didn't know existed until 2 weeks ago. You need to do more publicity.
You're a welcome guest.
Okay, we need to be better informed. It's a very critical issue. People don't seem to give it the critical nature. That's what's going on. And today I'm offering a 30-day footy in the bookstores. And by the way, there's a major bookshop in the centre of the city without naming its name or its location. They refuse to stock the book because the buyer is a greenie. The only conclusion I can come to. And I've actually sold my medical books, and I've written 3 international bestsellers.
What street are they in?
And what street are they in? I've forgotten. But my point is they won't sell it. I said I'll come there and I'll sell every lunchtime. I'll sell 10 copies of the book. And they make a hell of a lot more money out of the book sale than I do. I make $2.70 or $2.80 selling them to the bookshops. It's terrible. So,
Tell us who they are.
that's what, sorry.
Tell us who they are.
Well, my point is I can't prove it's a greenie. But they rejected the sale. The salesman's been there 3 times.
You've got 25 people who can investigate.
Okay, well, there's a bloody, excuse my French for swearing, there's a bloody tram thing goes past their front door. Anyhow, sorry, I don't know if I've overdone my time. I've waffled a lot.
No, it's good.
It's good, Alan. It's good.
No, stay here. I could probably spring the odd question or two, but Chris has got a question, and Paul and Chris, you go ahead, and Mike, to pick up questions. Perhaps just.
No, I won't do it this time.
No? Okay.
Just hear them.
All right. Okay. Chris, go ahead.
Alan, where on the globe is hydrogen being produced now in commercial quantities?
Nowhere. And nowhere in mega quantities.
Mega.
Mega quantities. The type of quantities you need to change the scheme of things.
So it's nowhere.
Nowhere are producing, but there's, I think I said the figure was 92 million tonnes of hydrogen are produced annually because it's industrial gas. It's used heavily in industry.
It's nothing new. It
There's
exists. It's well established.
No bulk supplies.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Peter?
Well, I was going to ask, and once again on the subject of hydrogen, where in the economy, theoretically, are they planning on using hydrogen and replacing what with it?
Okay. The issue, I think hydrogen has got quite a future if, and this is the big question, if you can get the price down to $1 to $1.50 per
From
kilogram.
$6 to $1.
Yeah.
That's a tall ask.
It is a tall ask, but I think if we can get there, and by the way, green steel is sensible. I trained as a metallurgist a long time ago. I couldn't even find out what's metal and plastic these days, but whatever. But it can be done. But the question is, can it be done economically with getting the price of hydrogen down to $1.50 or $1? It can be done, and I think Australia have got some expertise in that area, and they're going to try and make it happen.
Well, yeah, that's the economics of it, but it doesn't really answer my question in the sense that where were they planning on using it?
Okay, well, can I say what's going to, if they want to do it for iron ore and steel, they want to, in fact, they've got the iron in West Australia, and in fact, south of that, or Geraldton, or even further, Port Hedland, they're planning to produce green steel there.
So it's to be used in
Thanks.
industry,
Yes.
but it's not to be used in household. It's not to replace the methane in the gas lines then.
No. This is for industrial, mainly producing. The main application is producing steel.
Mike,
There was an approval, I think it was yesterday, of a power plant at Dubbo, north of Dubbo, that when I looked at the details of it, they were going to produce hydrogen, store hydrogen, and also it's right next door to the, I think it's Borroloola, somewhere anyway, the gas pipeline that comes to Sydney runs alongside it, and there's a bleed system to add, and the conditions of the approval say they can't blend more than 30% of hydrogen into the gas.
mix it.
Yeah, well,
Blend the gas with something, and I presume that's used.
that's happening in America.
Yeah.
Those bleed systems are happening in America. I don't know a lot about it, by the way, but in my research I came across
They don't allow
that.
that to happen.
Yeah.
We keep rolling on.
Can,
David.
can hydrogen be transmitted through existing natural gas pipelines into domestic users?
No,
Because of hydrogen embrittlement?
exactly.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons why that we talked about
It'll
this
never be
bleed.
commercial.
Well, the point is though, and I can't remember the exact figures, but there is a percentage you can mix it with methane or whatever. You don't have to change it from pure hydrogen very much to reduce that embrittlement substantially. And what's also happening in America, they're trialing. They're putting plastic pipes within the metal pipelines to try to get around that issue. But the valve and confluence where they meet and all those type of things, they got real problems trying to get over that thing. But it is happening.
Peter, another Peter.
I think you've really hit the nail on the head, Alan, I really do. I've been pushing for quite a few years now that there needs to be a scoping study. If you've got any development, you normally have a scoping study, pre-feasibility study, and on to a final feasibility study. There's none attack that in regard to unreliables. And I think if the Libs got into the coalitions, started to say, right, we need a scoping study, these impossibilities would come up and people would really start to realise just what a pile of bullshit we've been fed.
Yeah.
So then going to pumped hydro, it can only work with pumped hydro, right? The irony is, and I speak now from being involved with the conservation movement since May 1950, I'm 91 years old.
A bit of a worry. Thought you got rid of him.
He's one on the other side that's come to the real side.
The very people who bleat about renewables, the Greens,
Yes.
have been responsible for locking up all the good pumped hydro sites in eastern Australia from the tip of Cape York through Tasmania in national parks, the whole lot of them.
Yes.
So how's it going to work?
Well, can I? The first part of your question, or wasn't a question, it was a statement. The first part of that statement was, and that's why I proposed rather the scoping studies of the West, because we're talking about macro across the whole spectrum of what has to happen. And it's a very complex issue, and it's very hard for anybody to get a grasp of the whole picture. And that's why in my first recommendation was to have a Royal Commission, so we can start to get to grips with what really needs to happen and find the technical brains that we need to find to make sure it all happens. And we ain't got them now.
No,
I mean, in that book, there's one blatant political statement. It says, Mr. Prime Minister, please find a better energy minister. Somebody who's got engineering skills, who understands what's going on, and not be sworn to ideology. Über alles.
Alan, there are surprisingly, God, I wish I could get him to come here, or not him, but a number of other like engineers.
Yes.
You as an engineer would perhaps recognise their names, but I communicate to all of these people on a fairly regular basis, or by blind copy. you remember, I don't send your emails out. I keep your email addresses strictly confidential. I don't share your contact details with anyone. Anyway, there are more than a few engineers in other states who would love to have been here tonight.
Yes.
Really. Paul, you wanted to raise a question, yes?
Yeah, I've worked in the gas industry and in the electricity industry, and one of the things that really amazes me is that the process for generating electricity is very simple, but a lot of people don't understand that in the majority of cases you just boiling water to make steam.
Make steam.
And the pressure from the steam turns a
Turbine.
Turbine,
Yes.
which turns a generator,
Yes.
and that produces, that's where the electricity comes from.
Pretty simple, really.
Or, in the case of the gas company when I worked there, they were talking about putting, I remember them saying, gee, it'd be nice if we could bring some generators from Japan and bolt them onto the pipeline from Moomba to Sydney that comes from, or used to come from
Yes.
Moomba to Sydney. So they were talking about what I call internal combustion
Yes.
engines
Yes.
turning the generator.
Yes.
My question relates to, you mentioned peaking plants powered by gas.
Yes.
And what was going through my mind was I'm wondering whether you're talking about boiling water type generators or internal combustion type generators for that purpose.
Okay, I didn't address that issue directly in the book. I left it vague. I mean, there's a limit to what I can put together. I mean, the facts in the book are outstanding. By the way, I also explain in layman's term how all these things work. So I tell the layman how you generate electricity in a power station with water and steam, how you produce your steam and all that type of stuff. But I haven't gone into any detail about gas cleaning plants, gas firming. What's the word? It's not the right word.
Gas turbines?
No, well, yeah. Well, I do refer to it. I do refer to Curry, the one at Curry, and there's another one being built further out of town than that. I do refer to them, but I don't go into any great detail. And I don't profess to have a great detail about gas firming plants. Okay. There's much detail on many things in the book, but there's not every answer that you want, because the book was going to be 360 pages long, which is my medical book was 360 pages long. And when you start getting beyond that, from a commercial point of view, you start every page extra you put in, you lose money, because you've got a threshold price in the marketplace of about $40. If you go above $40, the offtake of the books goes down dramatically. So therefore, I tried to get to 360, but it couldn't be done. So I ended up at 495. Because if you get to 500, because this book's also on Amazon, on ebook and also print book, and if you get to 500 pages, all hell breaks loose with Amazon, because they have to use different machines and all sorts of, and the costs go up and all the rest of it. So I don't have the answer to that particular question. I don't know.
Thank you.
Jim down the back. Alex next.
Thorium. Have you put much on the thorium?
Yeah, there's actually about 12 or 15 lines on thorium, what those 12 or 15 lines are quite, not momentous, the wrong word. They're quite important to the extent that there's a company called Copenhagen Atomic, based, which some of you know, obviously, if you comments your response, and they believe that in the coming 2 decades they're going to
Production line.
thousands of these around the world. Thousands is the number they
Production
use.
line machine.
Correct, and they're going to put them in there, and they are going to find their place in the market. So I don't go into great detail. And by the way, it's also they all under purchase PPAs. They provide you the thing free of charge, and they get the income from the usage. which pays them and gives them a capital return over time. I think that will develop, but if you look and start investigating, doing a search on thorium, it's surprising how little recent feedback there is, because the cost of these micro and SMRs is going to be so low when they also get into production streams, and the storage of nuclear waste has been well tackled in Finland. And I noticed the guy we mentioned earlier, the TV guy, the guys on CIS, he was in Finland yesterday. I saw him on TV, and he's been visiting there's an underground nuclear waste disposal place there. I've looked at it closely and what they've done, and I just can't believe that Australia don't take that opportunity and build one at Woomera. I've also been to Woomera, where the stockpile is, and we should be building one there. It should be. It's geologically one of the most stable areas in the world. And I told somebody that at a conference 2 weeks ago. Lo and behold, I went home and I found it that afternoon. They had a 5 on the Richter scale tremor in exactly the area where I suggested they should put it.
Perfect law.
So, whatever.
Alex.
I've got 2 questions. First, prompted by other questions about hydrogen. You talk about hydrogen production. Do you mean like mining it mostly, or do you mean electrolysis? If only 0.1% of what production now is by electrolysis, what do you mean by hydrogen production?
Yeah.
Like, do you mean like extracting it from water?
It's chemically. Sorry, I think as best I can recall, and you stand up and get these questions fired at you. Thank good. You guys asked more difficult questions than Ben Fordham did 2 days ago. So, whatever.
There's more yet.
That's right. Okay, that's right. You're only just warming up. But I've got to go in 5 minutes. That's not true. But the point is they chemically separating it.
So from what?
Probably from methane or something, or ethylene or something, or whatever. I don't know.
So in other words, it's not actually a green.
I don't know the answer to the question.
A lot about electrolysis.
Yeah. Well, electrolysis is the go, and Twiggy's built that big plant up in Queensland at Gladstone. It's cost some hundreds of millions with a lot of government money behind it, and it is. They've got these things, and they got an automated production run. But they don't talk much about sales.
So the second part of the question is environmental concerns with wind turbines and deaths of birds and bats and disposal of the blade. How long the life of the product?
20 years life of with the present blades, the present blade chemistry or production materials that are used. They say 20 years.
And disposal of those blades.
They'll find a solution in 20 years. I don't know. As far as birds are concerned, they actually got quite sophisticated software on these things. That particularly in America, they're very sensitive to some of the eagles there because they're national icon and all that stuff. So wedge-tailed eagle, I think they call it, whatever. And they've got very sophisticated software detects them within 1 kilometre or 1.5 kilometres. And guess what? Some of the farms stop 40 times a day.
What happened?
The wind turbines shut off 40 times a day because there's bird life in the neighbourhood.
Oh.
So, but and it's still killing some of those. But the number of birds that have been killed, I mean, we're talking about millions a year. I mean, many millions. I can't remember the exact figure, but it's staggering.
Okay.
The figure I saw was 25 million birds and bats per year in Spain.
It's a huge number.
Yeah, that's my reading of it as well. The number of deaths from wind turbines is astronomical, but never all that well qualified. Where do you find the data of the wind turbine areas are obviously in many cases in isolated areas. Those that are offshore, who knows? So if a bird gets killed and lands in the water and drifts away, there's no evidence it's washed away.
And I think it affects whales.
The sound is reportedly has an impact upon the hearing
especially the gay whales.
Of whale. Gay whales. See if I can remember three quick things from my perspective. I'm very pleased to have had you come along here, Alan.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm denied. I didn't do it well.
You've noticed that. By the way, Alan, he's given it away. He lives at Breakfast Point. That's pretty close, isn't it?
Yeah, and in fact, the most polluted area of Sydney.
Oh.
There's no more pollution than anywhere else in Sydney. And
It used to be the old gas works, I remember it well.
It's under the
Under the ground.
under the playing field.
Ah.
It's encased in 10 or 20 metres encasement. And if it was twice the size, it'd be an ideal place to put an SMR on. I'd go up there and clean the windows and everything.
Well, I'm going to come to an SMR in a minute. You're a very welcome guest here. You're not very far away. I'll give you a little card in a minute.
Yes.
This is our stomping ground.
Yes.
Almost every, but a few exceptions on a Thursday night. Not as many as people here tonight, but we usually gather here, usually in this area, we have dinner. Where we can, we organise a guest speaker, much as yourself,
yes.
on the topic primarily about the climate-related issues,
yes.
because a few of us here believe that carbon dioxide, CO2, is a pollutant and the primary driver of so-claimed global warming. So that's our primary focus. But out of that, it's obvious to the likes of myself and Mike, when Mike and I started this group 17 years ago, not in this club, but elsewhere, we don't perceive it as the primary driver of global warming. I think that's misinformation that's being used as an excuse to drive all of the madness that's upon us today. CO2 is being used as the excuse, the alarmism, to pour billions of dollars.
Trillions is the word.
Trillions is probably
Trillions is yesterday's story.
Just madness.
Trillions.
So, just my way of saying, you're a welcome guest here.
Thank you very much.
You don't need to be invited. You just come on a Thursday night.
I'll come.
You're very welcome. As a slight change of pace, this is Alan's other book. I don't need to read it because you and I have a lot in common.
Yes.
I'm a survivor too.
Yes.
Perhaps not from radiation. I had a prostatectomy.
Yeah, I understand.
But 20 odd years ago, and I'm still here.
Yes.
So, for those of you that get a regular PSA, I do encourage you to keep a weather eye on it.
100%. Yeah.
And a final point, it seems to me, as a non-scientist, but someone with a background in international telecommunications, and my good and associate friend Mike over there, who I hope you've met.
Yes, I have.
That's our background, international communications, and an early experience with radio propagation and the atmosphere, the ionosphere, and how we communicated 50, 60 years ago using the ionosphere as I claim, a free antenna. Still there to this day. And how I got mixed up in this craziness is beyond me. Anyway, I have an hypothesis of a future energy solution, Alan.
Good.
But you don't need to make a comment either way. But
I'm not shy normally.
All right. Well, we hear about SMOs, small modular reactors, and you put on screen this evening micro modular reactors down to 10 megawatts.
Yes.
Well, good. But frankly, from a personal point of view, from working from the consumer back, I'm the consumer. So too are all these people. They're all consumers.
Yes.
I don't want 10 megawatts. I don't even want 1 megawatt. My house, I'm told by my good friend over there, Mike, I say I think I'll have 150 kilowatts.
Yes.
Mike says, no you won't. That's too much. Really?
Yes.
What do I need? Mike says, all I need is 20 kilowatts. By and large, I think that's what most of the people in this room need to run their household electricity. About 20 kilowatts. I'm now not talking about a huge, big modular reactor. I'm talking about, this is me as a former product manager, providing the engineering machine in the background with the specification.
Yes.
My specification for a 20 kilowatt nuclear, I should call it a mini micro reactor, is about this big.
Yes.
and it'll sit underneath my fuse box. And it'll run. I'll need to have water coming to it, of course, to cool it down, because it's going to be a steam generator running 24 hours a day. I won't need it all of the time, not during the night. So I'm happy for the excess power to feed back into the grid.
Well, a lot of people were also waiting for that to happen, and they found it
So-
rudely this morning. It's not going to happen. That's why I
They're
got
gonna
pumped
turn
off
it
the
off.
air this morning.
So there's that's a thumbnail dipped in tar for someone with an engineering background, and trust me, I'm not going to ask you. You're not going to be the only person that I ask that question of,
Yes.
because if any of you look on the web from time to time on YouTube, you will find right now there's advertising. Sabine Hoffenfluffer, I think it is. She's there. She's engineer. She's often there, and she's there promoting a new little minuscule nuclear component
Yes.
delivering, what is it, 3 volts.
Yeah, microwatts.
Microwatts,
Yeah.
microwatts, minuscule. So at one end of the spectrum, available today is a tiny little nuclear atomic reactor that you can buy, delivering 3 volts or something, tiny. At the other end of the scale, we've got maybe a micro reactor
Yeah.
at 10 megawatts.
Yeah.
Well, they're slowly coming down. Between those extremes, science tells me that there will be someone that will find a market for a nuclear device that's smaller, compact, that will suit us all. So I call it a mini micro reactor, capable of 20 kilowatts to start with, average household. And then maybe for a block of flats, something a tiny bit bigger, lives in the basement.
Yeah.
It'll do half a megawatt, a whole range of stepped up, high manufacture, production line, like a motor car, comes off the production line, powered. Uranium? I don't think so. Thorium makes more sense to me. There you go. That's a very rough.
Okay, I just respond if I.
Go,
Sorry.
go.
I can respond briefly to that. Households in Australia, a third of them have already got solar panels. Some of them have a hailstorm and half of them are ruined.
Yeah.
Some of them are already becoming less efficient over time, even though the efficiency's being maintained with the newer technology they're using.
2% loss a year, I hear.
Yeah, it's getting better all the time. And by the way, my understanding is that there was a couple of Chinese researchers at the University of New South Wales are now in China, and all that technology is in China, and the Chinese even perfected it even better to the point that the best solar panels in the world, technology-wise, I understand, was coming out of the University of New South Wales, but these Chinese guys have gone back to China, and China now doing, they've got all the thing going. But the point I'd make, we've got solar on a lot of rooftops, third and be more, but you cannot, it's fine having it there and having these smaller reactors as you suggest, but the fact is they will not produce the power that's needed in the industry. If you don't have industrial power, you've got nothing.
Oh, I agree.
You can't run a mining situation, smoke and mirrors. You've got to run, you've got to have power to do that. Now, a lot of the mining companies, and I've been and I've seen a couple of them, 2 of them already, where they put in huge solar farms and they're using gas because they happen to be near a gas pipeline. So, but in the 2, they're getting by and they're getting off running diesel engines to generate the power and all that type of stuff. But to run a modern manufacturing, and we still are a manufacturing economy, we only got 5.9% of the workforce working in manufacturing. When I retired, it was a 9 or 10 or 11. When I came to Australia, it was about 14% of our workforce worked in manufacturing. We are needing to work with high technology stuff and lots of other stuff, and we need much more power, and we can get out of these smaller type things. There will be a time for them, but I suggest before they really make a dent on the market, it'll be our kids that'll be talking about it, not us. And I wish we all lived 100.
Well, I don't expect to see that broad concept of mine, and I totally agree. industry, of course, does need more power. And I simply see the design field moving in favour of producing the box that'll deliver what a particular industry or a small town. I come from the bush, I don't come from Sydney, I come from a little tiniest little town called Cunell. Nobody knows where it is, hardly anyone's heard of it.
I've heard of it.
Canandra.
My wife was buried, I married a Canandra girl. I'm not far away. So a reactor of that nature to power small hamlets and towns in regional areas makes a deal of sense to me.
But they'll be micro-reactors.
Yeah, they'll be micro. Yeah, it's a great opportunity.
Sorry, I keep walking out of the screen.
I can see a great marketing. I've got a sales background as well. I can taste the potential sales for something like this, for this technology. It will take the world by storm. It will be a revolutionary step forward. The unreliables won't know what hit them. And by the way, you can be forgiven, but you have to stop using the word renewables.
Really?
Yes. It's a word very carefully conceived by marketeers. Behind the scenes, where there's big money involved in producing the sales and marketing campaigns in favour of the, wash my mouth out, renewables, the unreliables, they sat down and worked out, we have to find something, a word that has positive connotations to it that helps us sell this concept. And so out came the word renewables, and they use it all the time. I have to admit, I used it as well until suddenly it dawned on me, what's happened here? It's very clever. The word to counter it is simple. It starts with the word R, but it's not renewables, it's the unreliables. Or, sorry, it starts with U, unreliables, and or unreliable energy. And it's an interesting, you're a good candidate, Alan, to test this out with.
Yes.
Try it and watch the reaction you get. And I suggest, invite all of you to do the same thing. In the general course of conversation with friends, family, business associates, and events like this where you've got an audience, just let it fall out of you. When you're talking about the wind and solar, just refer to the unreliables and watch the reaction you get from the audience.
Oh, yeah. It's quite, since I came out with this particular book, when I came out with my other books, it acclaimed by a lot of my friends. And it just so happens I have an extraordinary amount of left-leaning friends. As soon as I showed them the cover of that book, you'd thought I had a nuclear power source in my pocket. Because they got acute indigestion or something else, and they sort of left and they haven't come back. By the way, in the book,
none of it is evidence.
In the book, I take real exception. Gutierrez is standing in the water out in the Pacific Islands, and up to his knees with his fancy suit on, and he says that this shows you what it's going to be like in short in the Pacific Islands. But what he doesn't understand, and the University of Auckland have done amazing good research and quality research in that area, which I've read. And the fact is the Earth's crust in that area, it's part of the Ring of Fire, is so unstable that there's 46% of those islands are growing in size, but it's not because there's sand adding to them. It's because they're being pushed up because of movements in the Earth's crust, which have nothing to do with the melting ice.
Tuvalu and a lot of other islands are growing.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyhow, so
Tuvalu is the poster boy because George Monbiot arranged a cabinet meeting underwater.
Yes, that's right.
Tuvalu to prove that sea level rise was dangerous and was a result of global warming. Absolute nonsense.
That's right. The Maldives, where some of that was shot, has since had an airport built a metre above sea level. And there's nothing more.
There's nothing more absurd than our former chief environmental commission, or whatever his name was. He bought a house on the banks of the Hawkesbury. And I know exactly where his house is. I used to play that place. And he's within a metre of the high tide mark. So,
Flim Flam Flannery.
that's what that is.
It looks like we might be, well, we've got about 12 minutes. I've just, thank you. No.
Alan, do you think there's enough people in the Liberal Party with the guts to bring this on?
Well, can I tell you, okay, to answer, is there enough there? I don't know the answer to that. I've sort of I was active in that party years ago, but I lost all the interest. Ben Fordham asked me 2 days ago in my interview with him, he said, who's going to win the nuclear war, Dutton or Albanese? And I said, unquestionably Dutton. And he was surprised. And he said, why do you say that? I said, we are in that nuclear 2.0, starting as of 2028, 2030. And I said, the drive around the world into SMRs will be so massive and so substantial. And we're getting our own nuclear submarines and all that type of stuff. It'll just be, it'll just flow to the point you just can't stop the flood waters. And can I say, by the way, I did analysis, I talk about it in my book, about that. The inquiry, 151 people submitted to, 148 submitted to the inquiry, and I did analysis on them. Some of them were just emotional claptrap, for or against, I might add, but taking those out of the equation, doing analysis of that, 61% were pro nuclear in that situation, and I thought that would have a far bigger anti activity in that situation. And all the evidence that I'm seeing, there's more and more and more acceptance of what's going on, and a sensibly conducted argument. And I tell you, I was at this conference last week, and there was 1,250 people there, and I spoke to 200-300 people, and half of them complained about Bowen and the ideology is driving this. Whatever, but I'm just making the point that there's so much developing in the community, in sort of, this is not intelligentsia, but it's people that most people are there would be university educated, not in the humanities, I might add. Excuses to everybody else. So all I'm saying is, I think time is right, and I don't think they'll get up with that policy next year, but in 4 years' time, I think it's a real likely situation. Anyhow, that's it.